Welcome back to Shadow to Soul. I'm Dashni, a regression therapist and a soul guide. On this podcast, I share real stories from my work. Stories that show how what we carry internally shapes what we experience externally. This episode is about fear. Fear that shows up in the present, yet has roots much earlier. Millie came in feeling stuck in her work. There was a constant fear of her boss, a fear that affected how she spoke, how she responded, and how she showed up. She held herself back. She constantly adjusted and compromised. She stayed quiet even when she had something to say. Over time, this shaped her experience of work. She felt small, powerless, and she felt pressure from all sides. She felt like she had much to endure, and at the same time, she remained in this role. A part of her wanted to move. She was ready for something else. But alongside that was a fear of what would come next. And this fear was so great, it paralyzed her from simply taking a step towards looking at different options. Over a couple of sessions, she experienced different moments in time in her life. She first saw herself at 22 years old. She was at her first job, and she noticed a very strong reaction towards authority, a constant sense of nervousness, the need to get things absolutely right all the time, and a need to avoid conflict. Her boss felt incredibly powerful, and within his presence, she felt the impact of his energy deeply within her physical being. In this moment, through the wisdom of the adult of today and the strength of the adult of today, she was able to help that 22-year-old. Within that energetic space, the 22-year-old was now able to speak freely. The intensity of the tension that she had felt within her body began to ease off, and she was able to express to her boss what she needed. She was able to ask for space at work to be able to work with ease, rather than having the constant overhead of pressure. And as she voiced what she needed to say, something within her opened up. She was able to release her fear, her lack of self-worth, her lack of confidence, and in doing so, she was able to claim back her own resources of her own worth, her own confidence, and overall a sense of being able to exist without fear. As we continued, another layer began to emerge. Her awareness moved to her 28-year-old self. She had recently come out of a relationship. There was sadness, a sense of loneliness, a sense of carrying the emotional responsibility of her relationship without support. The relationship had ended because her partner hadn't been able to stand up to his parents. And as she fully experienced this moment again, she recognized an underlying thought and emotion. I have nobody. And she recognized that that thought wasn't from the current situation. It was something that she had been carrying for a very long time. It was her belief that she has nobody. And with that belief, she carried sadness. She carried the burden of emotional isolation. And once again, as the adult of today, she was able to connect with that younger part of her to bring the reassurance and support she needed to be able to process what had happened. And again, within the energetic space, she was able to voice what she hadn't been able to voice to her ex-partner. She was able to release the emotions and the energy of what she'd been carrying. And she was able to retrieve her own sense of, again, worthiness, confidence, and self love. The resolution of these two layers allowed her a sense of safety to confront her boss of today. And so within the energetic space, she invited her boss in. And as soon as he walked into her space, she became aware of how strongly her body responded to him negatively. Instantly, she felt the fear, she felt the pressure, and she felt the anger that she had held within herself. And in the intensity of that moment and in the intensity of those emotions that she was carrying, it immediately connected her to another experience carrying the same pattern. Her awareness began to move beyond her current life. She saw herself in another lifetime, a home with constant pressure. There was always something expected of her, something to prepare, something to manage. In the moment that she had landed in the lifetime, she was in the kitchen. There were things happening around her. There seemed to be an event that needed to be prepared for. There was food to prepare, multiple tasks to complete. She felt rushed. She felt watched. And within that moment, she noticed a presence in the house that dominated the entire space. It was her father-in-law. He was loud, hypercritical, controlling. And as she looked at her father-in-law closely, she recognized the same reaction within her, the same energy she experiences with her boss in her current life. There was the same fear in her body, the same pressing feeling of pressure and intimidation. Her body reacted immediately. There was tightening in her chest. She felt heat rising through her, a feeling building inside her that she'd carried before. Her father-in-law moved towards her, getting closer, using his presence to intimidate her. She tells him to stop, but he ignores her. He continues. And he gets too close for comfort, and so she pushes him away. And he falls. And in that moment, everything escalates. Her body is flooded with fear, and her mind races. Her thought, I need to get out. And in panic, she leaves. She walks away from the house. She walks away from the pressure, the conflict, the tension. And she goes back to her parents' home. The space is empty. There's no one there. Her parents are no more. And she stays on. Days pass, then months, then years. And she continues to live alone. Her husband had come once, but she ignored him. She didn't know if her father-in-law was badly injured or not. She just carried the weight of that incident. She carries the isolation. She moves through life quietly and all alone. She keeps everything within herself. As she went to the final days of her life, she noticed herself alone in her room. The space was quiet. Her body was weak. There was no one around her. And in that moment, she becomes aware of the life that she had lived. Years spent carrying everything within herself, keeping herself isolated, creating distance between herself and everyone else. And as she looks back across that life, she felt the utter loneliness that had stayed with her throughout it. The sadness, the isolation, the absence of love and connection. Her awareness moves back to the moment that she left the house. the fear, the decision to walk away. And as she watches it, she can see how that moment shaped the rest of her life. She saw that leaving did not bring her peace. If anything, it led her further into isolation, further away from connection, support, love. And as she continued to reflect upon that life, another understanding comes through clearly. She can feel that her soul path had been something different. Her path had been to speak up, to remain present, to stand up for herself, to come forward with self-love, self-worth. She recognized that her sole lesson for that lifetime was self-love and self-worth. And the only way that she was meant to learn that was in the absence of it. And in that moment, she began to experience another path, one where she did have her self-love and self-worth. She saw a life where she stayed connected, where there was love, and where there was conflict, she was able to stand up to what was right for her, to what was true for her. She was able to express herself with confidence and with compassion for herself and for others. She recognized why she made the choices that she had. She saw how fear and hurt that she had picked up in childhood shaped her responses. She recognized that when your sole lesson is self-love, the only way to learn it is when there's an absence of it, when there's an absence of love. Because if her childhood had been filled with love, with connection, with support, her self-love would never have come into question, and it wouldn't have been something that she would have needed to learn. And with that understanding, she felt peace. The loneliness that she carried in that lifetime, that was also stored in her body, began to lift. Her body started to feel lighter, and she felt her energy flow. She didn't feel stuck or stagnant, and there was a calmness within her she had never felt. And from that space, that experience finally came to a close. That past life got triggered when she was 3 years old, and it had been active within her space for decades. When she was 3 years old, she saw herself in her room. Her parents were in another room, voices raised. They were arguing. She heard her father say, "He will leave." She heard it, she felt it, and her body began to respond. In that moment, her mind tried to make sense of what was happening. She gave it a meaning that made sense to her. They are going to leave me. I am alone. From that moment, a way of responding began. She became quiet. She stayed out of the way. She learned to exist without drawing any attention to her. And in that moment, her awareness once again moved to when she was 13, and she'd been sent away for school. There was a sense of uncertainty. She felt the distance from her family. She felt the absence of connection. And she carried a quiet fear. She navigated through this space very carefully, keeping things to herself, not drawing in any attention. She became fully self-contained. And from these collective moments, a pattern began. She related to the world from a place of self-containment. She carried all her experiences internally, never sharing, never expressing. She constantly adapted to her environment, she adjusted, and she continued life this way. Authority figures to her were figures of power, figures of intimidation. And she met authority in the same way, self contained, adapting, adjusting, being quiet, never expressing, never giving them a reason to create conflict. Authority felt powerful to her, it felt unpredictable. And her coping mechanism and way of keeping herself safe was to hold back. Within this work, she recognized that at the age of 3, that past life got triggered because of the emotional resonance of fear. At each stage, as she revisited those moments, she expressed what had remained unspoken. She released all that she had been holding within, and from the age of 3 to all the other moments, she began to reconnect with her own sense of self. And as she did this, her voice became available to her. Her presence became steady. Her sense of self strengthened. In releasing all that fear, helplessness, uncertainty, powerlessness, she reclaimed her self-worth, her strength, her self-love, and her security. She was able to bring peace to all those parts of her, using the wisdom that she has as an adult and her higher perspective to understand each of those moments. She was able to bring greater understanding to all those younger children who were only able to understand those moments with the lens of childhood. But with the wisdom of today and her higher perspective, she was able to understand the why behind all that happened, and she was able to bring back the resources lost within those moments of trauma. And as this happened, over time, she found her voice back. She found her sense of self present. And this began to show up in her life. It took her a few months for this to truly settle in, but she was able to show up at work differently, more confident, no fear. She was able to voice what she needed from her boss, and she was received with respect. She spoke differently to her colleagues. She spoke with strength. She spoke with clarity. And she set her boundaries, something she had never done before. She said no when it was needed. And she began exploring different opportunities while continuing in her role. She attended interviews. And she moved through life with confidence. Her external situation remained the same. But her experience within that situation changed. From this new, aligned sense of self, her inner reality began to shift. And as her inner reality changed, her lived experience changed with it. What forms in a moment can shape how we live the rest of our life. And when that is brought to awareness with understanding, and there's peace that is found within that, a different way of being becomes available. If Millie's story resonated with you, stay with what comes up. There is always more beneath the surface. If this podcast has brought you value, please take a moment to rate it. It helps others find it. Thank you for being here. Follow Shadow to Soul so you don't miss what comes next. Until next time, from Shadow to Soul.